Here we go. We're recording and we're live on YouTube. It's being live streamed. I just accepted that. I don't know who's joining us yet, but let me tell you, I'm so happy that people can join us tonight. I want to welcome everybody, and I'll welcome them again as more come. I'm Charles, and I'm the president and CEO of the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. Joining me tonight are some of my favorite glass artists, Bayard White, Peter Bremers, Ellie Burke, and we're going to talk tonight in celebration of our Summer of Glass exhibitions, which are currently on display at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. All three of you artists are part of these exhibits and part of our collection, and we're excited to talk to you. We're excited about your careers and where they're going and your different approaches to studio glass. And by way of starting, Mary, if I can kind of pick on you first, I want to just say a few words and then get you to say a few words. Mary Bayard White, in addition to teaching at San Jose State University for 19 years, Mary is an active eco artist. She started one of the first woman-run hot glass studios in the Bay Area, was head of the Crucible Glass program in Oakland from 2002 to 2012, helped to restart the glass area at the Ghost Ranch Retreat Center. I never will say this right, but Abiquiu, New Mexico, after the whole studio was destroyed in the flash flood. Teaching their stained glass classes for several years, Mary believes that combining art and environmental study is a healing process that guides people to new mutual understanding and helps them to find their own true spirit and their own community. Mary, I want to welcome you.
Thank you.
We all respect your work. We all love your work, and we're so happy you're with us tonight. I also want to introduce Peter Bremers. Now,
hi.
Peter and I have known each other for years. Peter's artwork is noted for his love of light and form, which he captures within monumental cast glass sculptures. While he began as a sculptor, moved to a glassblower, he was mesmerized by the hot glowing glass at the end of a blowpipe, but his work significantly changed after he took a trip to the Antarctic in 2001. He was inspired by things in the Antarctic, glaciers, icebergs, that he couldn't blow. And so how do you do this? You move into something like kiln casting. And he's been working in the medium for the past 20 years. He's made a huge name for himself internationally as one of the top cast glass artists in studio glass. Peter, so thankful that you could join us tonight. So
My pleasure, Charles.
I'm happy to have you. And let me also introduce now Ellie Burke. Ellie began working with glass in 1972, and that's just a little bit past the start of studio glass. So she's right there at the forefront. Her first focus was figuring out how to make something that didn't break. I love that. You know, yes, it's glass, but please, let's not it break. She experimented over time, making her own color canes. She fused together and blew into tiny vase forms. She was quickly captivated with the ability to breathe into glass to create a vessel. By the 1980s, she was freelancing as a scientific glassblower, looking for a way to differentiate herself in the growing glass movement in America. It was at this point she leaned into her natural whimsy, which she used to full potential in her flamework details. Ellie's perfume bottles series soon became her focus, which resulted in her combining her scientific experiments with intricate detail, and she often draws on imagery from the life and culture around her. Ellie, thank you also for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So part of the thing that's so fun to me about presenting glass, exhibiting glass, you know, making these presentations that reach people all across the country is that we have so many people that are interested, and you know this, you know, maybe even better than I. You know, what do you do? How do you do it? What are you going to do next? Where is this going to go? And So I'd like to ask each of you, maybe to kick things off, in probably the same order. What is the significance for you, Mary, of having your work in an art museum?
It's an honor. It's a way for people to see my work who might not see it. And I am thrilled to be part of a way of showing work that I think was for many years conceived as kind of a bridge between art and crafts. So it opens people up to new ways of thinking. And I've been doing a lot more public artwork recently. And so I think it's marvelous that I can have it be in a kind of a historical content where you can have newer and older work marked in progressions and collections of color or light or whatever the collection is.
You know, you touch on a very interesting point to me personally, because we, as a museum, when we got into glass, we were so excited about everything we saw, but also our nature is to think about, you know, Harvey Littleton. What did he do first? What happened after Harvey? When did Dale actually make something? Who did Dale teach? Who did those people teach? How did this, you know, we love the history of it. And, you know, in contrast to the private collectors that are so generous to us, I love that they're picking things and filling their homes with the things they love. And in this Fendel Rosenbach exhibition, the family came out and said, "Oh, you display it very differently than our mother did." And I thought, well, yeah, because actually this isn't a house. It's going to be, you know, you're going to be on pedestals and you're going to be under vitrines, and there's a different whole sequence to things. And it's fascinating to have the, you know, the gentle and I think uplifting collision of those two worlds, the private collector world and the public collection, where people come every day to see your work. Peter, let me ask you the same question. What do you feel the significance is to you of having your work in a museum collection?
Well, I totally agree with Mary that you know, it's a museum is a platform. A museum is supposed to be visited by people, many people of all levels of education, you know. So a museum is an educational institute, and to be showing in a museum is not just an honor. It means you're reaching out to a larger public, and that's the bit I really love about it. You know.
Well, and you know, in that vein too, I think that I'm aware that the public looks to us to bring them the best of the best. And I know in having the work of Peter and Mary and Ellie, we are bringing the best forward, and we're saying to the public, trust us, this is as good as it gets, and we're going to keep this. And I think this is very important. We're not just going to show this once. We're not going to show this here and there. We're going to be showing this constantly. You know, what they use in our phrase, in our business, is the phrase perpetuity. We're going to be showing this in perpetuity, and you can come back and fill your goblet again with the great sensations and experiences of seeing the work of you three artists. Ellie, I turn to you and I ask the same question.
Sure.
How is it important to you to have your work in a museum?
Well, the work will not just be either in my household or the people I was lucky enough to purchase and be in their household. It will be in the public forum. Anyone can come through the museum at any time, any year, and perhaps see my piece and hopefully be enchanted by it and uplifted by it. And that's very rewarding for me.
Well, and I'll tell you, Ellie, that the daughter of Mrs. Fendel, Alison Breyer, wills are always complicated things. I don't know much about estates and wills, but I know they're complicated. And of all the people in the family, she was the person designated to find a home for her mother's glass.
Oh.
And one of the stories that she told me in our first couple of weeks of discussing it coming here was how much her mother, Sylvia, loved your glass.
Oh, that's
And I
very
thought
sweet.
that was so sweet,
Yeah,
it was
thank you.
a wonderful thing. And, she, I guess like a lot of collectors, she had to put her toe in the water, and then she decided to put her ankles in the water and her knees, and then she jumped in. And I think it's each piece that she got led her deeper into the pool of glass and made her happier. So it's pretty thrilling that happened. And as she went on, I suspect she wanted to collect more glass, but I think she was just under 90, and that wasn't in the cards, but we're so happy that she collected what she collected. Well, let me throw another general question out to everybody. Do you remember, and this could be anybody commenting on this, do you remember the first time that you heard that you were in a museum collection?
Yes, I do.
Tell us,
There's
please.
a collector in Rockford, Illinois, donated, and now suddenly her name escapes me, but she bought all of her earrings were asymmetrical pairs. And so she had an asymmetrical pair of my hand earrings.
Wow.
And so that's what was donated to the Rockford Museum of Art in Rockford, Illinois.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite sweet. She continued on to purchase more glass. It wasn't, left as an estate, but yeah, that was the first. She came to a show where I was exhibiting and said, well, I want you to know it's part of the permanent collection. So that was very thrilling.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Peter, Mary, do you have thoughts about this?
A permanent collection that's really the cherry on the cake, because some of these museums, thinking for instance of the V&A or other major museums, is that they have such a large collection that most of it is basically in a stock space somewhere and nobody gets to see it apart from maybe the curator.
True.
But, yeah, I do remember very well. I was only a few years into glass, and I had the honor and the fun and the privilege of doing a workshop with Lino Tagliapietra.
Ah,
And I had 3 designs for Lino, and he looked at the designs, and then he looked at me, and he looked longer at me than he looked at the designs, and then looked at the designs again, and he said, okay. And we started working, and we made 3 pieces, and 2 of those ended up, they were actually bought by the Museum of The Hague, it's called the Municipal, well, that just changed name. Now it's the Museum of Art of the City of The Hague. And that was amazing to me, but hey, I had Lino to do it. I think I owe that very much to Lino, but it's wonderful that they have those pieces. I'm very proud of that.
oh, I think that's terrific. I think that's terrific. Mary, do you want to touch on that one?
I started working glass with Marvin Lipowski in '68. And I think I've met Peter kind of through Marvin a couple of times. But I don't think I really got into a museum until my second year of graduate school in '82. And William Wormus was out here from the Corning Museum, and he bought a little reverse painting of mine, which was this tiny little piece that was just all black except for this little rose, and it said, "Turn fear into faith." And I think that was my first one. And I've never seen it on display at the Corning Museum, but they do have it somewhere in a vault.
Well, it must have felt good though, right?
I was just thrilled out of my mind.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. That's a great story. And you know, you and Peter both touched on this aspect, is that, you know, by nature, museums acquire and continue to acquire more things than they can ever put out all the time. But you know, the difference, you know, and this is my perspective. You can, if you are energetic, you may have too many things, but you can rotate so that everything gets to see the light of day and gets a public, and the public learns something about you and about your art. You just have to be ambitious as a staff, I guess, is what I'd say, to not be afraid of rotating like that. In our new, I'll speak to this later in the talk, but in our new glass storage vault, I've got enough shelf space for about 14 to 1600 new pieces, and nothing's in a box. Everything's going to be out so the curators can see it, so collectors and artists can get a private tour, because I really want to know that, oh my goodness, that piece on the top shelf in aisle number 3, that hasn't been on display for 2 months, for 6 months. Let's get it out there. Let's get it out, and let's keep this all rolling, because the public wants to see it.
Well, I taught for a year in Ireland at the College of Art and Design, and the National Museum of Decorative Arts has a vault. It's not really called a vault. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the old barracks, and it's just stacks and rows, and you can walk through. I found some old stained glass windows from the 30s that I'd been looking for. I mean, it's as popular as their current displays. People go there whenever possible.
Yeah, and I think that I think we're going to be able to do that on an appointment basis with this new thing we open in the spring, because it would be an experience that the public couldn't get otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be nothing like it. So if you did 2 tours with a curator a month, where anybody from the public can come in and we'll take you, as they say, behind the scenes, I think we'd have a ball.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a big question for
If you
everybody.
don't mind, if I can add something to
Yeah,
that.
go right ahead, Peter.
What I really like, Charles, is that you and your staff, when you make an exhibition, you give plenty of space to each individual work. And I think that is very, very good. To me, that's wonderful. One of the things I was talking earlier about the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. If you go to their glass collection or their glass department, a lot of it is just all put together, you know, and it takes away so much of the importance of individual pieces, you know, and I think your plan is brilliant. I love it. As long as you keep making these beautiful exhibitions where you give every work enough space, you know, because it's really important that every sculpture, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 or 3 dimensional, every piece gets its enough space to be able to be intimate with that specific little work, you know, or large work, whatever.
Well said, Peter. Really, you really want to be able to be intimate, close, and form a relationship with that work. And, you know, I think that museums, at least our museum, we have an advantage, because unlike a gallery, and you know, they're beautiful galleries full of glass, but they need to sell work. And so they're apt to put a lot of things in a room, And, you know, I get a kick out of it. When I go to Habitat for the International, I'm overwhelmed by the amount of glass out. But at the same token, I can put things on their little islands, and you can swim island to island and have a personal experience and form something in your heart that this piece gives you. So I'm all for that.
But you also have a very trained eye. So if you walk into a habitat, because you have a trained eye, you see very quickly what draws your attention and what you want to focus on. So in that sense, you know, for you and for me, going to Habitat is always a feast. You know, it's like kids in a candy store.
Yes.
But, and I know it's like that for a lot of collectors as well. But if you're not trained, if you don't know about glass, if you see glass for the first time, it's very different, because you're looking at sculpture, you're looking at objects, and then you start to realize, okay, they're made of glass. Maybe you can recognize it. Sometimes you can't, you know, and the story starts to unfold. It's not right there in your face, you know. It's a journey, and I like that. I love that.
That's a great word. It is a journey, and I mean, Peter, we both started in this business as sculptors, and when I came to Habitat for the very first time, it was to the International, I was very nervous that I didn't understand glass. But as soon as I walked into the room, I thought, you know, it's not about the glass, it's about the sculpture. And glass happened to be, it's not bronze, it's not steel. We just installed a beautiful large 18-foot piece in aluminum outdoors. It's a different medium, but it's all sculpture. And, you know, I think I've told a number of people, and maybe a couple of you, that, you know, I see sculpture in our field. I get proposals, you know, almost daily, and the best sculpture being made today in the country and maybe in the world happens to be made out of glass. And I find that the most exciting thing in the world. So I'm very happy about it. But, you know, raising that question, though, I got to ask each of you, in any order you want, have you faced any opposition that studio glass might not be accepted in every fine art museum?
Well, I think in the 70s, that was something of a discussion, definitely. But I think it was like 1981 or 82 out here, Dorothy and George Sachs started collecting, and they bought a piece of mine really early that I think Dorothy still has in her kitchen. And they did donate to the De Young Museum. So they kind of they shifted things. They started collecting with their passion, and then they convinced the museum to prioritize and to make glass something really important. I know Marvin, my teacher, was always trying to push the museums. I didn't really care myself as much. I liked walking in between art and craft. I liked kind of confusing people. I thought it was interesting.
That's a great perspective. Ellie, you have any thoughts there?
For flameworking, which is the technique that I used, it was very much looked down upon in the 1970s. And it wasn't well into the 80s when flame workers were, particularly Ginny Ruffner, started working on a large scale, and she was sandblasting the work and she was painting it and made it highly sculpturable, and really then pointed out, well, it's not flame work. That's not the problem. It's the artist and what they're doing with it. Are they doing something interesting and exciting and fun and something to be involved with, or are they just doing something repetitious that you could find in a city mall? So And again, it was craft, but then again, craft was starting to open up and become considered more of a fine art, fine craft material.
Was it Freubel?
Right, the Freubel company where she worked, correct.
Yeah,
forget
you made
that
those
name.
incredible crystal hammers with flamework glass, which was really kind of confused people because they were such
Uh-huh.
cool sculptural objects.
Right, correct, yeah. So luckily I lasted long enough that when people started to look at flameworking as a potential art piece, my work was there. But it took me until the late 1980s to focus in on whimsy, and so that I had a focus to use my skills. So
We're kind of in the game of seducing people, aren't we? I mean, and there's a funny thing because I feel there is still an issue in the sense that, for instance, Art Basel Miami will allow glass if it comes from Ai Weiwei or other artists that have really built their career on more traditional materials, if you like, stone, metal, bronze, plastic sometimes, but there is very little. I mean, there's a lot of glass. When you go to Miami, there's a lot of glass. And at the same time, there's not a lot of us. You know what I mean? So we work the medium, and you know, even when I hear studio glass, I have a problem with that. I actually have a problem with studio glass because that already confines it to a studio. Would we say studio bronze or studio steel or studio clay? No, we don't. So there is it's not all that different what we're doing. We're just using a different medium. So we're all artists in our own right. We're all sculptors. We all work in a medium, and we've chosen glass because it's such an interesting medium. It has so much to offer. It has such a variety, and it's a wonderful material because it's also so expressive, you know. So in a way, we seduce people. When I say that, I'm not just talking about the beauty of the material, but also we seduce people because we're trying to show them something they haven't seen yet, you know. And I think that's still going on, and I'm okay with that because why not? I mean, it's great to seduce people.
Well, Peter, that's a great take on things. And I just want to add to what you're saying that from the museum perspective, when you go through art history programs to, you know, eventually end up in a museum working as a curator or as an administrator or something, the traditional art history books don't feature crafts and they don't feature glass. So right off the bat, your future museum people don't know anything about glass as a medium. And you get hired and you're a curator of sculpture, you're a curator of prints, you're a curator of, you know, paper goods, who knows, paintings. And so one thing that I don't think they anticipated or mean it, but a lot of museums don't have anybody on staff that understands it or takes the time to. You know, frankly, they're not paid to. So I was joking with a few friends of mine at museums that really don't collect glass. And they said, well, if we got a glass curator, we'd have to cut the hours of the print curator. And she'd be really mad. And then the painting curator would be mad if the new glass curator wanted to spend any money on new pieces because it would come out of the painting budget. And I thought, how funny, because nobody has a deep-seated disinterest. That it's just selfish behavior because we've been trained that way. in my case, I was lucky because I found glass as the director and the chief curator. And I'm spoiled. I get to do what I want. So, and Peter said, give me a show. And I thought, sure, let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, I think
Speaking-
the term studio glass came up because of the schools.
Yeah.
Because in the United States anyway, the schools hadn't really taught or presented glass as a medium. So that, I think that's in the United States, that's how that term started. And I think it just designates more how schools began to teach, with very small furnaces and facilities that weren't like factory settings.
That's a
But
good, that's
I
a good
think it
point,
kind of
Mary.
confused because, for instance, at San Jose State, we were part of spatial arts. So the students didn't get a degree in glass, which I love. They just got a degree in sculpture. And they could come in and cast or fuse or whatever they wanted and make components for their sculptures. So it didn't categorize it or separate it from other 3D materials.
That's a really good way to do it. But you raise a really good point because it's related to the whole idea that the art history people, they're trying to figure out what courses to take. So aren't the studio people. So what do we call it? Let's call it studio glass, and we'll get students. And the funny thing is, if they don't get students, they can't have the program, right?
Right.
Because some dean will say, you don't have enough enrollment.
Right. Right.
I just faced that with museum studies, by the way. So
Oh, right.
not enough students, not enough enrollment. Okay, but so here's this wonderful medium. Here's this really, brilliant medium, which to me, it's everything you want to do in 3D, but on top of that, you have light. So you had to make a decision, though. Each of you had to make a decision that you weren't going to be carving in wood or stone. You weren't going to be casting bronze. Glass was going to be your medium. Talk to me about that individually. What made you brave enough to do it?
Well, I had come to California to study with Viola Fry, who is a ceramic sculptor.
Yeah.
Makes big figurative work. And I left the Midwest to drive west and study with her. And then she kind of retired and she wasn't around very much. And Marvin Lepowski had just started the glass program at California College of Arts and Crafts. So it was exciting. It was international. And the material itself just has this ability to be opaque or transparent. And clay hardly ever is completely transparent. And I just was drawn in a flash. So my undergraduate degree is actually in ceramics, but by the time I got it, I already transitioned into being in the hot glass shop.
Wonderful.
Huh.
Ellie, your thoughts?
Oh, well, I didn't go through the school programs. I was all learning on the job and just submerging myself into my studio. And it was just the material melting and moving and what I could do with it that just kept me going there for 48 hours a week, 60 hours a week. It just didn't matter because the material itself was mesmerizing. So.
Super. Peter?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Charles, that I used to make light objects.
Yes.
And when I saw liquid glass at the end of a blowpipe, I thought liquid light. That opened up my whole world. So I had to start using glass, but I wasn't trained in glass. I was trained as a sculptor. And I think glass is just really sexy, because it's all about heat and flames coming out of glory holes and all of that. I mean, it's a very sexy material. We all know that that's just the appearance of it, because it's basically just hard work. But it has that quality that you know, it glows, it moves, it's liquid, and it solidifies, and it's a really interesting material because it has organic aspects. When it's hot, you can just shape it, you can pull it, you can push it, you can do all kinds of things with it. But it's not like clay, which is dull. Sorry, for me it is, in the sense that you can put your thumb in it and the thumb just stays there, right? And you can bake it and then you got your thumb forever. You know, glass is not that way. Glass has a lot of character, a lot of, I would almost say glass is like a troubled adolescent. You know, you try to make it do something and it's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And that to me is very much one of the real challenges of glass, is that you keep trying to move forward, to do something that is a challenge, and maybe it will break and maybe it won't. And it's a very, it really is a material that you have to communicate with. I find that of all materials, but glass is maybe the harshest one of all. You know, I mean, stone has some of that, but wood, for instance, certainly doesn't. You know, so each material has its own characteristics, and glass has a lot of characteristics. Very, very interesting, beautiful material.
Well, I'd like to just put in a pitch for the international element, because it was 68, 69, Johnny Toso, the famous flame worker, would come to our school and make pizza and pasta. And then we had Anne Worf come and make these beautiful etched pieces. And I just loved the fact that this was a completely international community, and that there was a lot of interchange all over the world, and that we were, I had these Swedish young women designers come to my hot glass studio in the 70s and look around, because they were working with the factories and they were thinking about starting their own studios. And so there was all this wonderful interchange. So I thought that was a big part of what drew me in.
I agree with you, Mary, and it still is. It's so international. We know what people are doing in Australia or in Japan or even in South Africa. You know, it's a very small world when you look at it, and that is very precious and really wonderful, because you can travel the world and knock on a door of somebody's studio, and they'll probably open the door and say, "Who are you? Do come in, have a look, you know, see what I'm doing." And that I love that. I think that's quite extraordinary.
You know, I gotta throw in a comment there too, because, you know, I came to the International some 7 or 8 years ago for the first time, and what struck me most was your community. You artists got along, you cared for each other, you shared things with each other, you were really knit pretty tightly together. And compared with, you know, I've been doing this for about 40 something years, there's nothing like that in the painting community. Right. There's nothing like that in the printmaking community. Printmaking community is a little closer to glass because printmakers need more than one printmaker. They need helpers. Yeah, but I'm struck by the closeness of the sculptors, and I'm struck by the closeness and affinities of the collectors. This is a really, you enter this world and boy, you feel like you really came into a great family. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, even our little Bay Area Art Glass Alliance they have presentations every month, and they really liked getting together, and they've added artists and collectors, and it's just everybody greets each other and has a good time. And It's a lovely community out here.
Well, I remember that first trip to Habitat. I pulled Ferd aside in the middle of the evening and I said, Ferd, I have to ask you a question. Why is everybody so nice? he thought I was crazy. I said, I hang around with a lot of artists every year, and they're never as nice as these artists. So this is my salute to all the glass sculptors out there. Man, it's a great community. It's a great community.
Well, if you're blowing glass, you've got to be nice to your pals because they're helping you.
So true, right?
Very collaborative kind of, operation.
So
Not really
true.
a solo game.
Hey, Mary, can I ask you a specific question, actually? Environmental study is important to you, and what drew you to environmental work?
Well, my father was a geographer and his field was natural resources and water resources. So I was thinking about the history of this piece. It was 95 and I had just bought an old Victorian and I was raising it. You can see down in the bottom up. So for 2 years while I was teaching, we lived in this little house up on stilts and
Funny.
kind of camped out in the backyard, which you can do in California all year round. And I just began to think about the importance of housing and how important it is to people. And then I made another real change in my work. I decided, even though I was running a hot glass shop and buying spruce pine batch and helping facilitate heating and melting a lot of glass, that for my own personal work, I would only work with recycled glass from then on. So that was like 90, 95, sometime. Really, it started earlier, but I really just decided that was it. I was done. I wasn't going to be making anything else. And so those two elements really kind of, made me more and more interested in going back to my full circle. My father worked for the UN on water resources. And now I'm very active with the Women Eco Art Dialogue, and it's a website and a magazine. And I can do things that are out of glass, but they're all, glass that I find or things that I melt. I have solar panels to run my kilns. It's very low impact. And I'm back kind of where I wanted to be when I first went to art school in the 60s.
That's pretty terrific. That's pretty wonderful. Ellie, I got to ask you, what got you interested in flamework glass? What got that underway for you?
A man in my apartment building had just been out to California for instruction, and I believe it was UC Davis that brought in a wonderful, charming man from England named John Burton, who was making color by mixing oxides into clear glass, and he was showing people how to do that. PBS had a brief little program with him in the 1970s.
Right.
And so he wanted to start his own glass shop, and he was looking for people to work there. And I was working at an art supply store, but not particularly thrilled by it. So I walked into the shop and I saw what was going on with the tubing and the torches and everything. It was just mesmerizing. And so I started to be his apprentice there.
What city was that in?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
But wasn't he in Southern California for a long time? John Burton?
Now he may have been, but the man that I was learning from I'm not sure how long he was actually out there, maybe a semester, maybe 2, but he moved back to the Milwaukee area and then started this glass shop. But in 3 months, he and his partner had a fight and he left, and I was left as the head gaffer of the Flamework shop. I learned the whole product line in the 4 months. And then I was instructing people, and there we went from there.
Wow.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Peter, let me put you on the spot with one last question. Is
Sure.
that you and I have talked many times about this, but you travel to different places really has informed a lot of your work, particularly that 2001 Antarctic trip. And of course, here's one of my favorite pieces ever from the Iceberg and Paraphernalia series. How does travel impact you and inform your work, Peter?
Where do I begin? There were other travels before the Antarctic that really opened my eyes. So many. What it is when you travel, you basically open the door to new experiences, new food, different languages, different landscapes, different religions, different attitudes, different cultures. And all of that I found so inspiring and so interesting. And I still do. I still love to travel. I remember being on Rarotonga, one of the Cook Islands, and it's a volcanic island, and I was walking over it, literally from one side over the mountain down the other side. And I turned the corner at some point and there were 10,000 shades of green. And green was never a color for me. It was never something that I liked to work with. But when I saw the 10,000 shades of green, I had to weep because I realized that basically nature is as close as you can get, for me, to the divine, whatever you want to call it. Because I don't follow a religion, but you know, some might call it God or Allah, or whatever, it doesn't matter. If the creator has the way I look at it is that if the creator wants to show itself to humanity, nature is it. It's the easiest, the best way, because nature is just there and we are part of nature, but we're also part of creation. So for me, traveling is the confirmation of that whole idea. And at the same time, it's the confirmation that there's so much to be explored, to experience. So traveling is everything. Yeah, it opens your heart, it opens your mind, it opens your eyes. It gives you a broader perspective, I think.
Well, I think you've proved that through your work on and on. And I think it's wonderful. Here's a second piece from Peter from that Iceberg and Paraphernalia series. I'm just curious, glass and light, very special relationship there. And I know that there were artists, we were talking a minute ago about the 80s, and you had Larry Bell and Bill Irwin and Helen Pashagan, who called themselves light artists. And Peter, you've worked in light.
Mm-hmm.
When you moved on to work in glass, did any of the work of these light artists have any influence at all, or no? It's a different whole thing they're trying to do, but
it's different. It's a different approach. Like I said, when I saw glass blowing, when I saw that hot liquid gooey stuff at the end of a blowpipe radiating light, I realized that there was a material that I needed to explore. But I already made my own lenses and prisms, but I made them from acrylic, because acrylic has a beautiful refraction. So if you want to project rainbows on the wall, you can make a prism from plexiglass from acrylic, and it will do at least as good a job as a prism from optical glass. You know, so I was not looking for that. I was looking for the possibility of molding light in a almost organic form, and that really was the attraction. It still is. I still feel I make light objects, you know.
Well, I think that's true for everyone working in glass. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I think I wasn't really influenced by Larry Bell and other light artists. I wanted to do that. It was one of my aspirations to be able to be very conceptual about having the medium be light versus the physical objects.
Like Turrell.
Yeah.
yeah, another great.
And
Yeah,
also,
person with light.
very early on, I started putting lights in my sculptures in the houses. And my sculpture teacher would say, don't do that. You can't light sculpture. And I'd say, what there are a couple over there of my houses. And
I see them.
so
Yeah.
I was kind of trying to go that way. I thought it was very inspirational work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I want to thank each of you, and I want to thank everybody who's going to watch this and who is watching it now for participating tonight and for caring enough to come out and see what's going on in your work in our museum. It's exciting things are happening, as you can see, as we shift different slides here and there. I'll close with another unofficial remark that stay tuned, because you're going to see a new wing for glass next year. You're going to see a new storage vault for glass here. You're going to see the growth, the further growth, I should say, of a museum whose glass, in which glass is central. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope each of you have a peaceful rest of your evening. Peter, I hope you get to rest at all. Mary and Ellie, thank you so much. I'll say good night now, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah.
Good night, you guys.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.